Good morning, everybody. Bank holiday weekend. The weather is extraordinary. I went to the local supermarket to buy some charcoal yesterday. Virtually had to fight people to get to it. There was a run. So it's barbecue weather, and people generally seem very happy around the place. I particularly think the Conservative Party this weekend will be feeling not so much happy but relieved. But is the sun still shining for Jeremy Corbyn? This is the question, because one thing you cannot take away from Corbyn is towards the end of 2016, he looked in real trouble. Speculation as to whether he could survive as Labour leader. His standing in the polls nationally very low. Labour got down to 24% of the poll in one survey and then surged with the big, Jeremy Corbyn, and suddenly he was the cool dude, and they got as high as 42%. So one thing's for certain, Corbyn did bring big momentum to the Labour Party, but I just wonder, after the results that we've seen this Thursday, whether perhaps that bubble has burst. So what we saw on Thursday, for those that haven't looked at it, 150 council elections that took place across the country. Labour won 2,350 seats, up 77. The Conservatives 1,332, down 33. The Lib Dems 536, up 75. The Greens 139, up 8. And UKIP 13, down 123. So, tough times for UKIP. Marginally better for the Lib Dems, particularly in southwest London. A little bit of encouragement for the Greens, though not very much. But Labour, on the face of it, they're up. But what does this really, really mean? Has Corbyn's bubble burst? I'm going to ask Paul Richards, who is a former Labour advisor and columnist for the Progress magazine, what he makes of this. Good morning, Paul.
Good morning to you.
You know, the truth is that we were hearing, certainly the Mayor of London, Sadiq Khan, saying there was no part of the capital that Labour couldn't win, and speculation that maybe Wandsworth would fall to Labour, maybe Westminster would fall to Labour. It just didn't quite happen, did it?
Well, not only that, but we lost in Barnet as well, so we went backwards in some parts of the capital. And the problem is, if you start going on about seizing the crown jewels of London and sending busloads of young activists to Westminster and Wandsworth, and then you fall short of actually taking those councils, even though you make gains, then you end up with egg all over your face, don't you? I mean, it was a real failure of strategy, but also of the messaging ahead of the election, raising expectations. The problem now, Nigel, is that the Corbynistas can't sort of look at themselves in the face and say, oh, well, that didn't work. They're now telling each other that this was the best result since 1971.
Yes, I keep hearing this. Where does that statistic come from, then?
Well, out of the fevered imagination of Corbynistas overnight, I think. I mean, it doesn't bear up to any of the metrics at all. If you look at councils gained, it doesn't work on that one. Only gaining 77 overall councillors. I mean, compared to 1995, for example, when Labour gained 1,800 councillors. We're 5 points down on the general election result when we got 40% down to 35% on the national vote share. So it's just a made-up number, and they all repeat this back to each other, and it becomes a truth. So it's just sort of manufacturing of truth.
One of the things that struck me is, I led UKIP, Paul, through some big growth years, sort of 2012, 2013, 2014, and I saw our poll numbers go from very small numbers to, 20% and up around that number. And I remember that a sort of never-ending series of stories about, a UKIP councillor here or there saying something stupid or doing something stupid, and the drip, drip, drip in the end, without doubt, began to put a lid on where UKIP was. And I'm just wondering, you mentioned Barnet. Barnet is a part of London with a reasonably sizable Jewish electorate. And I'm just beginning to wonder whether this constant debate about anti-Semitism is perhaps above all what has stopped that kind of shiny image that was there around Corbyn.
Well, I think this stain of racism, which runs very deep, I think is definitely turning people off. I mean, if you look at the numbers in Barnet, interestingly, the population in Barnet is about 15% Jewish.
Yeah.
So it wasn't just Jewish voters rejecting Labour, it was their friends and their neighbours, equally disgusted by anti-Semitism, also doing the same thing. And, that is a feeling that most of us sort of decent people in the Labour Party completely share. We abhor the anti-Semitism that's happened in the last 2 years, and it's people who've come into the Labour Party from other parties, other traditions, and have brought that with them. You know, it wasn't an issue under Ed Miliband or previous leaders. It's happened in the last 2 years, and it's it's cause and effect. And people look at that and they go, well, this is horrible. How can we be losing seats against such an unpopular government because people perceive us to be racist? This is the Labour Party. We're supposed to be held to a much higher standard than other parties, and yet this is what's happening on Thursday.
And some internal criticism. I mean, Chuka Umunna making it pretty clear that with these results, difficult to be confident about winning the next general election, and Alistair Campbell, I mean, really putting the boot in, to be honest. I mean, is Labour now, are we now back to the days of arguments about whether Corbyn's the right man to be leader?
Well, some of us have always been having that argument, it must be said. I mean,
Yes.
the election result was a surprise in terms of, I'm talking about the general election last year, it was a surprise in terms of the increase in vote share, but, we didn't do very well in terms of number of seats compared to the Conservatives, and they were 1 million votes ahead of us, and, we got 40%, but they got 43%, and that was an unpopular, supposedly unpopular government. So I'm very wary of predictions. I mean, it is difficult in this very febrile atmosphere to say, well, this election means the next election will be one way or the other, but the shine has definitely come off.
Yes.
I mean, we're losing members now, so the membership has peaked and is now going down. The election results on Thursday show there isn't really much of a correlation between the size of your party and your electoral performance. I mean, we're massively bigger than all the other parties, but it didn't translate into votes necessarily. And don't forget, outside of London, we went backwards. We lost Derby Council. So it's not a good picture. And my real issue is, a party picking itself off the map after Thursday should have a deep, hard look and ask itself the questions, what went wrong? Instead, we're getting the repetition of it was the best results since 1971, we're all doing well, it's all fine. And that is just sticking your head in the sand. That's not a responsible act.
And finally, and unfairly, I'm going to ask you, on the current trajectory, how do you assess Corbyn's chances of winning a majority at the next general election?
Well, it's an absolutely enormous mountain to climb, and the way you climb that mountain is by reaching out to centrist votes and people switching from the Conservatives and other parties to your party by appearing moderate, mainstream and sensible. And those are not three words that you necessarily associate with the Corbynites, are they?
Many would agree with you. Paul Richards, thank you very much indeed for joining us. Well, wow, wasn't that, from a former Labour Party advisor and columnist from the Progress magazine and a Labour supporter, they were pretty frank words, weren't they? He wants the Labour Party to be moderate, to reach out to people in the middle, and he fears that under Corbyn's leadership, and with some of the influences around him and some of the friends that Mr Corbyn appears to have, that is now looking difficult. Folks, I think Corbyn's bubble has burst. That is not to say that it's impossible for him, with the SNP and perhaps the Lib Dems, to form, a government at the next general election. But I think whether Labour succeed or fails now, in my view, depends more on what Mrs May does with Brexit. You saw the Conservatives doing better than expected because a lot of people who voted UKIP in 2014 voted Conservative. Back in 2014, those local elections, the same cycle we've just voted on, were held on the same day as the European elections. It marked the high point of UKIP taking votes from the Conservative Party. At a subsequent election, the 2015 general election, UKIP took more from Labour. That's why in the general election last year, people were surprised how many UKIP voters had gone back to Labour, but this time round they're surprised how many have gone back to the Tories. They were different stages of evolution of UKIP. But the one thing I'm certain of is that those people who came to UKIP in those European elections of 2014 and have gone back to the Conservatives, if Mrs May does not deliver a very, very clean Brexit, they will not be going out and voting for Mrs May again. So I'm not saying all is lost for Corbyn and Labour, but I am saying I think the shine has gone, and I just begin to think, and Barnett gives you perhaps a clue, I just begin to think that sometimes that drip on the stone, those constant allegations that racism is a problem within the party that hasn't been dealt with, and too many of those drips begins to make a hole in the stone, and I begin to feel perhaps that's what's happened. What does Danny in Epsom think? Good morning, Danny.
Nigel, how you doing?
I'm doing well. I mean, overall, Danny, I have to say, I think probably today people are keener on the weather than they are on party politics. I sense not only has the energy, enthusiasm and buzz gone out of Labour, I think we're actually pretty disenchanted with both the parties at the moment.
We are, Nigel. I mean, I'm part of the struggle, actually. I ran in the local election going back quite a few years now in Coulsdon West.
Yep.
And I pride myself, I've become second behind the Tories, and I pride myself on getting a lot of votes for UKIP in that time and doing my little bit for Brexit over in Coulsdon West. But I just wanted to say that I think the Labour Party is basically a two-tier party. You've got the centrists, and I think you've got the people way out there on the far left, and I think they need a split. Because for people like me, for white working class or middle class people, I look at their front bench and it's like kryptonite. I look at Diane Abbott, the confirmed racist, probably the worst politician in political history.
That's your opinion. Some think she's terrific, you know.
Oh, yeah. I mean, I look at McDonnell and I think, I look at him and think, what a dinosaur. He's like, it's like a rebel. Corbyn hasn't changed his mind on anything for 40 years. I look at them and I just think, how could I ever vote for you? And, people like me won't vote for them. They're basically appealing to the lifelong socialists and the kids I literally look at them and I think, there's a real trend at the moment in society to blame the current government for all of our ills.
Oh, yes.
And I don't think, you can't do that.
Right, so Danny, there's nothing, as a white working class person who's pro-Brexit and did his bit to help Brexit, there's nothing this Labour leader's going to do to get you to vote for him next time round. Is that what you're saying?
Yeah, Nigel, when you look at the electorate, right, most of the electorate are in England, and most of those voters are centre-right, yeah? So the only way a Labour government ever wins an election, right, is by playing the centre ground and appealing to that part of the electorate. If you don't do that, you won't be elected.
Yeah.
And that's just the fact. Well, the other thing you do, you get into government and then you use mass forced immigration onto everyone and try and change the vote that way. They tried it last time.
Well, that's moving on a bit beyond. But hey, Danny, thank you. And Danny, white working class, not tempted at the moment by this Labour leadership. I don't think he's on his own. The Labour Party is in something of a turmoil after these local election results, with Alistair Campbell, Chuka-Umunna really openly saying they don't think, frankly, Labour did very well. And we just had Paul Richards on from Progress magazine making very much the same point, that actually, Corbyn has been damned a bit by the anti-Semitism row. And I think the shine has come off Corbyn. I think you've seen the big run. I think from here on in, it's going to be much harder for him. Tell me I'm wrong. Tell me this is just a minor dip in Corbyn's fortunes and that actually the happy days are going to return. But he's got some strong supporters out there like Peter in Guildford. Nigel, I'm sick of hearing Chuka-Umunna and Campbell, etc., attacking Corbyn. They will not accept that he's the Labour leader. New Labour are responsible for Labour's poor results with their constant backstabbing. They've been attacking Corbyn from day one, and it's about time they shut up or join the Tories where they belong. So there you go. There is some pretty strong feelings in Labour between the Corbynistas like Peter and the New Labourites like Alistair Campbell. Nigel, are you for real? The media is still trying to put across that Labour is a failure. Lol. Numbers don't lie. Do not let them lie to you. Well, you're quite right. Numbers don't lie. And whilst Labour were up, they were not up that much against the government that is, frankly, somewhat lacking in lustre. There we are. I'm being nice about Theresa May. It must be Sunday morning. They should have done a lot better than they did. And, the Mayor of London, frankly, looks a little bit silly by overplaying his hand and talking expectations up, perhaps to unreasonable levels. Colin from Aylesbury takes the other view. He says the whole Jeremy Corbyn claptrap has always been nothing more than a ridiculous farce. I've got more chance of riding a unicycle to the moon than Corbyn has of becoming PM. Colin, despite what I've said this morning, he still does have a chance of becoming the next PM because, look, between the Liberal Democrats and between the SNP, who's to say there aren't going to be 40 to 50 seats there between those two parties? That is what could make all the difference. And really, the big picture is that we have, to a very large extent, gone back to two-party politics, across England certainly, and I think Wales has to be included in that too. And that the UKIP vote, which was at times a very big significant vote, has gone down to about 2%, and it does appear we are a little bit stalemated. Brendan is calling from Nottingham. Good morning, Brendan.
Good morning, Nigel.
So, if the shine's gone off Corbyn, is his best hope that the Tories make a mess of it?
Absolutely. As a former UKIP member, the last time I voted Labour was for Tony Blair in 1997.
Yeah.
And I can tell you something now, and I didn't think I'd ever think it or say it. If May does not deliver a proper Brexit, I'm voting Corbyn, and I mean it. I've had enough. I've worked for the public sector, hiss, most of my life.
Right.
The last 8 years, Nigel, I've had 3 1% and 5 0% increases. Now, Labour have often said, Corbyn have often said, public sector, nurses, whatever, etc., 10%, 20%. The thing is, I've always believed, despite the fact I've never earned more than just over £8 an hour in my life, I've always believed in living within your means, and I've always believed it was important for the country to live within its means. But the way I'm feeling right now, we've waited long for this vote, and we got it. We won by a small amount, but the point is we won.
Yep.
And the way I feel right now, up until now, I voted Conservative, not because they represent my needs, but I felt it was best for the country.
So you were one of those.
So why should they represent me? But
so you're a Brexit means Brexit voter, Brendan, yeah?
Sorry, I am a Brexit voter, yes. But the way I feel now is to say, right, well, if you're not going to give us Brexit, independence, our courts decide everything, our government decides everything, etc., then I'll vote Labour. Who cares if it crashes the economy? I'm going to get big increases in wages. Why not be selfish and vote Labour? Who cares if future children and grandchildren have to pay for it? Because up until now, a person like myself have voted Conservative for sensible reasons. What is there to vote Conservative
Okay,
for?
no, Brendan, I think there's a very interesting point of view. I think it's held by quite a lot of people. A lot of people who've been voting for Mrs May in 2017 did so because their Brexit means Brexit voters. On Twitter I get, my friend that voted Labour all his life voted Tory this time. Because the hardline Brexiteer Jezza ratted on Brexit. Well, the problem Jezza's got on Brexit is they are all over the place. On the one hand, he sacks Owen Smith and makes clear the party won't support a second referendum, because if they do that, they know the word betrayal will be out there amongst many Labour voters. But on the other hand, whenever we see somebody else in a shadow cabinet appearing on television, they sound almost as Remain in many ways when it comes to the single market and the customs union as the Liberal Democrats do. Let's go to Claire in Edgware. Good morning, Claire.
Good morning, Mr. Farage. Well, unless I was voting a different election to everyone else, since when was success a failure? The Labour Party got nearly 1,000 more councillors than the Tory Party. They put on more councils, and yet they are deemed to be a failure. I live under the auspices of Barnet Council.
Yep.
It is quite simply the worst council in London. It is badly run. They're called the Easy Council. They outsource everything to people who are incompetent. We have no youth services. Our council tax is astronomical. For a Band C, you're talking about £1,500 a month. They have one of the highest records for taking people to court. My neighbour, who survived the Nazi Holocaust, they wanted to take her to court. Fortunately for them, she died before they could do it. Now, and also with regard to the front bench, what I'm hearing about Diane Abbott is pure, unadulterated racism. She has
racism? Why is it racism, Claire?
She defended. They say she's useless, she's incompetent, she can't do anything. As I've said before, she had one crisis, she had one mishap when she was in a diabetic crisis, and she's lambasted as some terminal idiot who can't put one foot in front of the other.
Claire, I mean, come on. She's had more than one. She's had more than one disaster on media, hasn't she?
Let me just finish my point. I believe that what she's suffering is unadulterated racism. She stood up for the Windrush generation when nobody else was speaking for them. She's fought for Stephen Lawrence. She fights for the Hasidic community in her area. Now, because the rather affluent Jews in our area so despise Jeremy Corbyn, they've kept a terrible council in, and we've got extortionate council tax for another 4 years.
Claire, I'm sorry, Claire. Are you suggesting that it's racist to criticise somebody who's black?
No, I'm saying what Diane Abbott has
Okay.
to endure is pure
Would you
racism.
accept that her interview with Nick Ferrari on this radio station, on LBC, during the general election, was, by the standards of any frontline political figure, a catastrophe?
It was bad, but then us in the NHS know why it was bad. It was her 8th or 9th interview that morning. Her sugar levels were disastrously low. She should have said to LBC, sorry, I cannot come and do the interview.
Well, let's assume that's right, okay? So what happened to her on Piers Morgan last week?
Well, I watched the interview again. What was the problem? You cannot expound on a policy that you haven't actually evaluated and completed. What she said is we need to look at Britain's immigration policy and we need to basically revamp it. But what Piers Morgan was trying to do, and I never, ever, ever, ever watch him. It's only because you made such a fuss of him the night before. I went and I went and got it on iPlayer, and I thought, up until that point, she was fine. She was expounding. It was about 6:30 in the morning.
Well, Claire, I tell you what, let's not get too sidetracked on this, but I mean, my view was, as Shadow Home Secretary, you've been in the role for a considerable period of time, you should at least be able to answer that question. Either way, Claire, you make the point that Labour have had a very good Thursday night. Look at the numbers. Labour across the country were up by 77 seats. The Tories were down by 33 seats. In a sense, this is rather like our equivalent of the American midterm elections. This is happening in the middle of a parliament. Labour would have expected, the point I'm making, I think we're all making, Claire, Labour would have expected and did expect to do much better than this.
Every government, every party always expects to do better, and they deserve to do better because their policies are excellent. They keep lambasting John McDonnell. When John McDonnell was head of finance at the GLC, it was always in surplus. All we're asking for as the people of Britain is we want our electricity, our gas and our railways back. We want to stop looking
Well, you'll only get that if you leave the European Union, Claire.
No, because the Germans did that.
No. Let's not fiddle around with this. If you stay part of the European single market, they can't do that. Finally, Claire, very quickly, do you think Corbyn is still set to be our next Prime Minister?
Yeah, he's the only truly honourable, decent, genuine human being in Parliament. He has morals that are so high, he has values that are high, and he will root out the curse of anti-Semitism, the curse of Islamophobia, the curse of racism, and he will make Labour, not the new Labour farce that we had, and all the moaning new Labour like Chuck Amuna. Chuck Amuna comes from the same part of the world as my family do, and quite frankly, I wish he would go back.
Claire, you have made the case for Jeremy Corbyn as clearly and as passionately as anybody in the country has made it. And I thank you for putting that point of view. There we are. Claire still believes he's on course. Many of the rest of us think the shine has actually rather gone off. Corbyn's Labour and New Labour are saying nasty things about each other this morning, because I tell you what, those results on Thursday were nothing like as good as people like Sadiq Khan had said they might be. Before I get back to that, and I'm asking you, has Corbyn's bubble burst? And I think it has, but I do not think that it's impossible he becomes the next Prime Minister, because so much depends on how Theresa May leads Brexit voters. But before that, a quick word on Donald Trump. He was speaking in Dallas, Texas to the National Rifle Association, and he was basically defending the right of citizens to carry weapons. He made the argument that the horrific terrorist attack that we saw in Paris would not have been as bad if armed citizens had been there. They could have dealt with the problem more quickly. And he also talked about London. He said, in London, which has unbelievably tough gun laws, a once very prestigious hospital right in the middle is like a war zone for horrible stabbing wounds. And, of course, he has received much criticism for it. Where did the whole thing come from? Well, actually, there was a piece that appeared from a trauma surgeon in a British newspaper 4 months ago, where he likened his hospital to an Afghan war zone. So that is where Trump got the quote from. But I guess anything Trump says or does about the United Kingdom between now and his visit on July the 13th is going to make news. And, of course, Boris is across on the other side of the pond. He's meeting National Security Advisor John Bolton. He's meeting Vice President Pence. And this is all about the Iran nuclear deal. Britain, the European Union, supporting a deal with Iran, whereby we ease sanctions, we basically give money to Iran, and in return they promise us they're not going to develop nuclear weapons. And Trump thinks that's a dumb deal. Trump, and particularly John Bolton, his new advisor, they see Iran as sponsors of state terrorism. And within the next 2 weeks, the deadline's the 12th of May, Trump says he's going to pull America's name from that deal. So Boris over there on a diplomatic mission, although not, to my knowledge, actually going to meet Trump himself. But as I say, all things Trump between now and the 13th of July will be big news. And what will be even bigger news, of course, is the meeting that is due to take place between Trump and Kim Jong-un. And they say they're going to meet at that demilitarized zone between North and South Korea. Be a pretty dramatic picture, won't it? Trump and Kim Jong-un walking there to meet. So whether you like it or not, folks, on this Sunday morning, Donald Trump is not going away from the news any time soon. But back to Corbyn, back to Labour, back to the constant drip of anti-Semitism and allegations of racism within the party that has not been dealt with. Those results certainly hurt Labour in Barnet. And I think more widely, there are people saying, I don't know, this Corbyn bloke, he seems pretty sincere, but look at the company he keeps. John is calling from Chigwell. Good morning, John.
Good morning, Nigel. How are you doing on this fine morning?
Well, I'm working, John, and you're listening. But I do intend this afternoon to. This afternoon, I'm going to do a little barbecue because I managed to get some charcoal just from a supermarket,
Lovely.
and
Very nice.
and I fully intend to have a barbecue. I may even allow myself a glass of something, and then probably in true British style, fall asleep in the sun and wake up tomorrow looking red.
Well, I mean, you as a defender of the working classes, Nigel, I'm sure you should be having a pint of something.
Well, I didn't say I wouldn't, did I? And I'm sure before I get to the barbecue, I'll stop at the pub. But that aside, John...
Well, Nigel, a good thing I don't have to come and defend Diane Abbott because your last caller just done such a sterling job. But I will ask you this, yeah? If you want to talk about politicians who are doing such a bad job, yeah? Can you ask Boris Johnson next time you see him, where's the £50 million from the Garden Bridge? Right, Nigel, look, I would like to say this, right?
John, just before you start, maybe you're actually beginning to answer my question for me. If there's 50 million missing here, if there's a government that's not delivering on much of its manifesto, if there's a leader who was strong on Brexit, now looks weak on Brexit, surely aren't these all the reasons, John, why Labour should have done better on Thursday?
Well, with the constant barrage of bad news about Jeremy Corbyn, it's no surprising that he didn't. Look, I'm surprised that he's actually doing as well as he is, Nigel. I mean, look at the people that you bring on. Yeah, you bring on Chuka Umunna, you bring on Alistair Campbell. They hate Jeremy Corbyn. Why would you bring them on when you know they hate you? So you're bringing them on purposely because you know that. Right? Why didn't you bring on some of the councillors that had won their seats?
John, I have spent time on this show with Alistair Campbell, and that, of course, is because he is one of the leading spokesmen in this country against Brexit happening. He edits the New European newspaper, and I think for many, I hope at least for many listeners, you get the two strong points of view on Brexit. When it comes to Corbyn supporters, I allowed Claire before the break to give a virtual eulogy about Jeremy Corbyn. So I'm very happy to hear both sides of the argument. But, John, do you? I mean, what I'm saying is this. I credited Corbyn today with taking a party that sunk to 24% of the polls to 42% of the polls. That of itself was an astonishing achievement. What I am saying, John, is that I think the shine has gone. I think the bubble has burst. I think from here on, it's going to be harder.
Nigel, he put on 77 new councillors. Nothing has burst. I mean, if you guys in the media keep telling everyone, oh no, the Labour Party, they're doing so badly, people will start to believe it, right? The anti-Semitism is just a load of rubbish again, right? Because what they had to do, what you guys had to do in the media, you had to find a minority that you could say, well, Jeremy Corbyn is racist against this. Like, you couldn't do it to black people because you knew that wouldn't work.
Nobody, John, nobody has called Corbyn racist. No one's called Jeremy Corbyn racist. No one I've heard of any repute has said that. What they have said is he's not been very careful about some of the company that he keeps. And are you seriously telling me that there is not a problem at all within Labour of anti-Semitism?
Nigel, look at some of the company that you keep, right?
I am not leading the Labour Party, John. That's the point.
Nigel,
forget no, John, come back to come back to the point. Come back to the point. You know, even Corbyn himself, John, admitted there were pockets of anti-Semitism within the Labour Party. Are you, John in Chigwell? Are you in denial?
Nigel, there are pockets of anti-Semitism within society. That's what society is.
No need to worry then, is there?
Why is Jeremy Corbyn the only person that must police all the people that he supports on the internet? How is that his job? How is it his job to support to go after trolls? It's not his job.
Well, it was my job as leader of UKIP to do that, I can assure you. And when you lead a modern political party, John, that's what you have to do. John, I think you're in denial over this.
Nigel, you didn't do that when you led UKIP, right? In fact, when you was at Thanet, right, when your campaign at Thanet, right, you said that you never had people from the BNP and the National Front alongside you. But all of your people at Thanet who was running your campaign was all ex-BNP.
Do you know, John, this is a tangential argument, but I will tell you this. When I led UKIP, we were the only party in the country that banned former BNP people from even being members. The Labour Party had former BNP councillors sitting for Labour. But that's a separate argument. John, OK, I understand it. You don't believe anti-Semitism is a problem within the party. Let me ask you, finally, we've had a good chat. Let me ask you, finally, do you think that Jeremy Corbyn is still on course to win the next general election?
Of course he's on course to win the next general election. That's why you guys are doing all you can to try and stop him. Of course he's going to win the next general election. You know he is.
All right, OK, John, listen, great call, very sporty. Well, John is absolutely convinced that Corbyn's on course to win. And as I say, he still could win. I don't see how he can get a majority. I think they have too many seats to win. It's going to be too difficult. But, you know, between the SNP and the Lib Dems, there could be 40 or 50 seats there. It could well be a coalition government, but only if Theresa May drops the ball on Brexit. Come on, man, you're still bashing JC. What about the appeaser in charge? Shouldn't she be under scrutiny 24/7? I get on Twitter. She is under scrutiny 24/7. Don't make any bones about that. And I think she's got a very, very difficult couple of weeks coming up. And let me just say to you on Twitter that the fact we are now 23 months since a referendum in which we very clearly voted to leave the customs union, and the Cabinet Committee, War Committee, was meeting this week to discuss what our policy is towards the customs union. Believe me, she is under scrutiny. Make no bones about it. And if actually, do you know what? If truth be told, I think our enthusiasm for both the main parties is pretty lukewarm. I think Corbyn's bubble has burst. The big M that he had with him that saw that party under his leadership go from 24% to 42%, and it was remarkable. You know, the success, the popularity that he enjoyed, I think that's burst. I think it's going to be much, much tougher for Jeremy Corbyn here on in. But some of you still support him very strongly, and despite the sunshine, one or two of you are very angry. Stephen's really angry on Facebook. Just remind us how many UKIP councillors are left in the UK. Well, what's that got to do with it, Stephen? Labour won more seats than all the other parties combined. Those of you whining about a new voting system, don't you idiots remember we had a referendum on that? No, we didn't. We had a referendum not on a proportional system, but on a preferential system. Separate debate, but Stephen, cheer up. It's sunny. Nigel, there is so much focus on Corbyn, re anti-Semitism, and yes, it is an issue in Labour, like it is in society. But there are other MPs in other parties that get suspended or expelled for racism. No one's saying this isn't an issue throughout all parties. It just looks like there's rather more of it in Labour than people had ever thought before. And I think the other thing is, people are rather critical of the way in which the problem has been handled. Often, it's how you handle a problem as party leader that is more important than the problem itself, and they appear to have been a little bit flat-footed on it. Paul's not convinced. He says Labour can still win the next general election. Do we really believe, I get on Twitter, that Jezza, with his front bench team, could seriously lead this country? Diane Car Crash Abbott, in charge of the Home Office, MI5, security, immigration. Let that sink in slowly. At the next general election, I will vote Labour. I'm wishing for Jeremy Corbyn to be Prime Minister, says Linda. Folks, I'm not saying it's all over for Labour in the sense that they're going to, collapse in the opinion polls. I'm saying the bubble has burst, the big momentum's gone. It is now, unless Mrs May makes a complete hash of this, and that is entirely possible, of course, but unless she does, I don't see how Corbyn gets a majority next time round. If he was on course for that, these results would have been a lot better. That is my view. What does Tony in Fareham think? Good morning, Tony.
Good morning to you, Nigel. Yes, I think Corbyn and his party have been exposed, really. The anti-Semitism argument was the last straw that broke the camel's back, I believe, for a lot of people, including myself. My parents were both Labour voters, but I've never been a Labour voter. And I've often wondered about staying Conservative, but I think the choice between the two, there is no choice between the two. If you want to see this country's defences stripped, then please vote Labour. And as for the unholy alliance between the SNP and Labour, well, let's look at what's in Scotland. Our new frigates are being built in Scotland. They've just built our new aircraft carriers, completed our 2 new aircraft carriers in Scotland. Trident is based in Scotland, or that will go under a Labour government, and this country will be exposed.
Tony, you come from a part of the world with a long Royal Naval tradition and look, quite a lot of army camps not too far away from where you are, and you clearly care. You clearly care about defence as an issue, which I do too, by the way. But there are a lot of people out there, Tony, that don't. A lot of people out there that think we should spend far less on the military, and a lot of people out there even questioning whether we need Trident. So you see, Tony, there is potentially a constituency for Corbyn with people who feel that way.
Yeah, yes, absolutely, and I understand where they're coming from. But let's look at what happened a couple of months ago in Salisbury.
Yep.
And let's look at what the Russians have been doing by floating their submarines down the channel. They've got new submarines. They're rebuilding. There is a new Cold War in place now, and the sooner people realise it, the better. And we cannot. So
the prospect of a pacifist prime minister ultimately puts people off voting for him.
I don't think he'll ever get to power. Because I just think he's too dangerous.
Okay. And you're going to vote for the Conservatives then, from the sound of it. But are there any circumstances, Tony, over Brexit in which you might not be able to go out and vote Conservative?
That's a very good question. I think that Theresa May has had some terrible luck. Not only has she made some bad decisions, but she's also had very bad luck, and I'm hoping that her luck will change and she will come to her senses and start listening to people who voted for Brexit. The majority of the people in this country voted for Brexit, and that's what they want. And we know all about the customs union, we know all about the single market, and these people that say we didn't.
But I tell you what's interesting, Tony.
Whistling in the wind.
I tell you what's really interesting, Tony, is now about 70% of the Tory vote is a Brexit vote, right? And if she doesn't deliver Brexit, a lot of those people next time round, some may switch to Labour, but an awful lot may simply stay at home. So the point I'm making, Tony, is she's vulnerable on this.
Yeah, she is vulnerable to it, and it's interesting to see how well the Liberal Democrats have done, really, because I think Vince Cable is very credible, but he's got the same views on defence that much of Labour has. So my view is that I think the Liberal Democrats will pick up lots of votes, but the Conservatives need to deliver, and it's
that's right, absolutely, Tony. If she delivers, then she'll probably be okay. Although, do you know what, Tony? Either way, we're probably headed for a hung parliament anyway. Thank you very much indeed for your call. Let's go to John in Formby. Good morning, John.
Yes, good morning.
Good morning. John is a regular caller to this show. So tell me, John, has this bubble burst?
Well, like Chairman Mao said on the French Revolution, it's too early to say.
Right. Okay. Politics being a long game and all that. Yeah.
Yeah. But I think Corbyn will go down in history as the worst Prime Minister we never had.
Right.
And I think it could still go his way. There mustn't be complacency. There's always the chance that the Tories will make a real mess of things, not just on Brexit, but everything else. And I think a lot of people, myself included, regard them as the lesser of two evils. And it's a bit like the Hilaire Belloc poem, better hang on to nurse for fear of
something worse, yeah. Yeah. No, I'm sure that's true, John. I'm sure that's true. But you know, you were a Brexit supporter. You're voting Conservative. 70% now of that Conservative vote is a Brexit vote. She's got to deliver, John, hasn't she?
I don't really know. I still think that Corbyn, Abbott, McDonnell, Thornbury, the rest of that gang are so awful that people may well stick with the Tories. What I would like to see is a bit of a UKIP comeback so that they could usurp the DUP and have considerable influence in government.
Well, you know, the one thing that UKIP did do was in proportional representation elections to do phenomenally well. They even won, goodness me, in 2014. But cracking the first past the post system, John, for a political party that doesn't have a class-based vote is very difficult.
Well, it's up to the electorate to do something about it. If there was some organised tactical voting, it could have two benefits. One, of keeping Corbyn out, and two, of holding the Tories to account.
Yeah, well, a UKIP comeback, John. A UKIP comeback. If Mrs May drops the ball on Brexit, it may well happen. John, I thank you. I'm going to move on to Sandra, who's in New Malden. Good morning, Sandra.
Good morning, Mr. Farage. I just wanted to say very little, and that is basically, I think we should be discussing UKIP.
Oh, well, I've got the wrong subject for debate, have I?
Not Labour Party. The thing is, when you were the leader of that party, you lost that position. And now you, as a presenter...
I did what? I'm sorry, Sandra. Sorry, Sandra. Come again. I did what?
When you were the leader of that party, you lost your position.
I lost it? What, I was sacked?
Yes. You were sacked, absolutely. So,
oh, this is good fun. This is good fun. I'm enjoying this, Sandra.
You are now you're the presenter of LBC and should be acting as a presenter and not targeting a Labour Party or Conservative or anyone else, just they discuss in general. But one does not mind that.
Well, if I was sacked, Sandra, if I was sacked from UKIP, Sandra, how could I have an objective debate? I mean, I'd be full of bile and anger and bitterness on this lovely bank holiday Sunday morning, wouldn't I?
Yeah, Mr. Farage, you've got how can I say, bad luck in you. And what you try to do is put every other person you don't like down. And I think maybe it might sound a bit harsh, but I think you should look yourself in the mirror first, and then maybe we should start discussing you.
Well, you know what, Sandra? I've had many things happen in my life, but the one thing I have not had is bad luck. I am one of the luckiest people that's ever been born. I survived a major road traffic accident where I was smashed to bits, cancer when I was very young. I got out of a plane crash, out of a light aircraft crash, and that's a very small club to be a member of. And I happened to find myself leading UKIP at a time when the Conservative Party had lost its way under David Cameron. And I helped the party to win the European elections back in 2014, the first time since 1906 that a party that wasn't Labour or Tory won a national election. So, Sandra, I may be many horrible, terrible things, but I don't bring bad luck.